If you've been looking for ADHD and autism strategies, you've probably noticed that many behavior plans fail for one simple reason. We're expecting skills that haven't been built yet. A learner may know what to do, but struggle to get started. They may understand the routine, but get stuck during transitions. They may want to be independent, but lack the systems and support needed to be successful. Today, we're sharing practical ADHD and autism strategies that address the behavioral barriers we see most often at home and in the classroom. Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna. We're behavior analysts who create weekly content about how to teach children with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about ADHD and autism strategies. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
We're so trained to look at behaviors that are observable and measurable, but in reality, what we're seeing is really just the tip of the iceberg. And if you think about an iceberg, the part that you see at the top are the behaviors that we're seeing. And those behaviors might be, the frustration, the non-compliance, the not getting their work done. But we really have to recognize that so much is happening under the surface. And it's our job to dig a little bit deeper and look at what might be some of the things that are getting in the way or causing some of these behaviors.
Yeah, and we look at our traditional behavior strategies and we think, okay, we'll just increase motivation, or we'll just make the visuals larger or make them easier to understand, or we'll put in a first then board and that'll do it. But we're often focusing in on those consequences when really the issue is a skill deficit. So while reinforcement's important, yes, use those token boards, but we also need other systems that can support learner success. We need to look at other things that might be going on, like Shira said, below the surface. And in other podcasts, we've talked about things like can't do versus won't do. And maybe kids don't have that skill yet, and we have to teach that skill instead of just trying to increase motivation. Maybe it's something about executive functioning. We've also talked lots about executive functioning in other podcasts. Check those out as well. But it could be something about just, it's task initiation with executive functioning, or it's staying on task, or it's the inability to be able to organize their thoughts or their things. So looking at the shift then when we're doing ABA from why aren't they doing it to, well, what's getting in the way?
So when we're writing up, behavioral strategies or behavior supports, we want to be able to recognize some of these skill deficits and put the right strategies in place to be able to build on some of the skills that we want them to learn. Because it's not always just what we're seeing at the surface. So the first thing is that we might need to reduce the response effort. So if we're, giving a learner who might have ADHD and ASD, and we're giving them, a worksheet with like a lot of questions on it, they might be able to do the questions, but it might just be really overwhelming to see all of those questions on one page. So we might give them 5 questions at a time. It doesn't mean that they're getting out of it or that they're not being held to the same expectation. It just means that a task can feel really big and overwhelming. We could break it down for them. We can break bigger assignments and routines into smaller chunks. So giving them a little bit at a time while they're building up the skill of attending and staying on task. We can use things like first and language. So saying something like, first do the thing that might be a little bit challenging, and then you can, do the thing that you might want to do. Also being mindful of not giving too many verbal instructions at once, because when we think about working memory, that's a lot to hold in their head. So giving them one task at a time, one direction at a time. But then also we don't want to be over accommodating. So we don't want to, not want to give them too many things because they're not going to be able to do it. But if we're giving them one direction at a time and then they're doing that well, let's push them a little bit further and continue to push them further. So giving them strategies to succeed, it doesn't mean over accommodating them. It means, meeting them where they're at, but also continuing to move that line so that they're learning the skill.
Yeah, another strategy would be making those expectations visible. And I talk about this a lot just in terms of verbal instructions. Words can disappear. So, if you're saying something, somebody might be comprehending it and nodding, but then forget what you said. That whole saying of going in one ear and out the other, oh, is there. So, words can disappear, but when you write them down, they're there. So, just trying to make things visual. If they can read, just write them down, paper and pencil. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be anything like that. But things like visual schedules, checklists, task analyses, written reminders, all of those things are really great. Technology is awesome these days too, because we can have reminders on our phone. We can have reminders on our watches. We can have apps that tell us, visual schedules and those kinds of things can be on apps now, which is really cool. So really looking at that piece of it. And then when you're creating those visual systems, also look at that independence piece and making sure that those visual schedules can hopefully lead to some more independence, right? So for instance, instead of somebody having to be there during a morning routine the whole time and say, okay, now do this next. Okay, now do this next. Now do this next. Can some learners have a morning schedule instead that can just do this, do this, do this, and they can check it off as they go? Maybe there's some kind of classroom work systems or homework checklists that they can do as well.
Yeah, I find when I feel overwhelmed or stressed, I'll definitely start writing down all the tasks that I need to do, and just seeing them in one place feels, very calming. So definitely making things visual feels a lot more manageable. Another strategy is supporting task initiation. For a lot of learners, it's really challenging to get started. Might even be harder than completing a task. It's just getting that thing started that might feel overwhelming. So we can use things like behavioral momentum, which is giving them, a couple other easier tasks to do, and then giving them the thing that might be harder. Those are called like high probability tasks. So if you know that they're able to, I don't know, throw something in the garbage and then go get their favorite book and then, sit down and do your worksheet. Using things like countdowns and transition warnings. So giving them a lot of heads up that something's going to change, that we're about to go into a new, work. If you want someone to, if you have a child, you want them to clean their room, letting them know when it's going to happen. Okay, we have 5 more minutes of TV and then we're going to shut it off and you're going to go clean your room. And you can also think about where you're putting reinforcement. So instead of reinforcing things when they're complete, putting the reinforcement right after the initiation. If that's what a learner is really working on, then having that be available after they get started on the task you want them to do.
Yeah, another strategy is around transitions. And I think about it, there's, people with ADHD and people with autism can have difficulty transitioning for a variety of reasons. But if you can predict this ahead of time and know that your learner is one of those people who, are triggered by transitions or specific transitions, predict that and then teach that. So, we can pull it out. I'm a huge, huge fan of priming, and we're able to say, okay, we're going to do this next, and here's what we can do. Let's role play it and let's pretend. And, role playing that out a little bit is always a good strategy. Using those transitional warnings that I think Shira mentioned for the last strategy, those help with this too. Okay, 2 more minutes, and then we're going to do this next. Remember, 1 more minute, and then you're going to put the toys away, and we're going to do this. Again, we can call them transitional warnings. We can call them priming. Visual timers help as well. If they see a timer, it's not just, okay, 5 more minutes, but it's actually setting a timer. They can see it visually, and that can help because then it's not about you telling them the task is over. It's the timer. Oh, the timer went off. If people can tell time, you can say, at this time, this is when we're going to transition. So you don't even need to set those timers, and they can learn that as well. Pairing in transitions with reinforcement. So at the beginning, if you can, teaching transitions by transitioning from something that's lower down the totem pole, something they don't like that much, to something that's really, a really preferred task can be motivating in and of itself. But teaching people to transition to higher preferred tasks and then reinforcing and saying, wow, look, you did it. That's amazing. You can harness that motivation. If that's not always possible, if kids have to transition to tasks they don't like, then providing extra reinforcement like, wow, I know you didn't want to do that. That was really amazing the way you cleaned up those toys and you went over here. I love the way you did that. And really making sure that you're teaching those transition routines along the way instead of just expecting it.
Right. It might even feel silly, but like practice it. Practice transitions and tell them, we're going to play a game. We're going to just practice lining up and walking down the hall and transitioning to recess and using reinforcement within that.
A lot of kindergarten teachers do that. And those are the good teachers. They literally practice routines for the first month of school.
hmm And then thinking about, this is where we reinforce behaviors we want to see more of. This is what we do well. So now we're teaching the skill. Let's focus on reinforcing the small successes, the things that are going to really help build the skill. And that's things like effort, initiation, flexibility, problem solving, all of those things that you can reinforce as opposed to just the finished product. It's not just offering reinforcement every hour and a half because, you didn't have a meltdown within an hour and a half. It's offering reinforcement for those small successes that happen that are really what the learner is working on that is hard for them. For more on reinforcement, we have another video. It's episode 65, so check that out.
Another strategy that I love to use and that I can't talk enough about is choice. And I think about, just daily living skills and the autonomy and self-advocacy skills that we talk about. It's about choice making. And if we can, make our own choices, we feel more independent. So if we can build in choices with daily routines, even if it's like, what spoon do you want to use to eat the cereal, this one or that one? If there's other meaningful choices like, hey, you get to pick out your own clothing. I mean, that is huge. In a classroom environment, if you can make some choices without changing expectations, like what color of pen do you want to use? It's still the expectation of writing everything down, but you get to choose, the writing instrument. Do you want to type this or do you want to write this? Which worksheet do you want to do first? Do you want to sit at the desk or do you want to stand somewhere at the standing station? All of these things and incorporating choice into all of these things can really help improve attention. It can help with that autonomy and it can help with just really increasing those independent skills.
And I do want to say that it's important to offer that choice proactively. So you don't want to get into a situation where the choices are being offered after some kind of challenging behavior or refusals, and then choice comes out because then you're using it as a consequence strategy. So it's important to offer those choices because they just deserve choices, not because it's a consequence of any behavior or anything. Another great strategy that we have in every single one of our behavior plans, it is never, never enough to just focus on behavior reduction and on consequences, but it's super important to always be teaching replacement skills. We don't just work on reducing challenging behavior because you can't reduce one without replacing it with another. And so, what do we want to replace it with? It's often going to be some sort of communication skill, being able to advocate for themselves. Sometimes it could be some kind of problem solving skill, but we can't just focus on what not to do. We have to really focus on what do you want them to do instead and be able to teach that really systematically.
We need a checklist here. Maybe we should develop one of, okay, so replacement skills. Have you thought about communication? That would be the very first thing on the list. Number two would be things like emotional regulation skills. And number three would be the attention piece of it. And, another podcast we did was about motivation versus attention. And, can they attend? Can they start tasks and those kinds of things? We'll have to think about that note for the future.
Home and school, can have the same goal, but we have to recognize as behavior analysts that we can't always have the same expectations across all settings. And we want to encourage consistency and generalization, but we're not going to have the same, visual schedule system or maybe the same identical reinforcement system that is more complex that we can have in a school or clinical setting. So we want to keep that really realistic. This is where we really love technology because that could be really easy to use at home and thinking about what are some really small changes that we can use at home that can make the biggest improvement. Sometimes I really like working with families on just routines and how to build routines, especially for someone who's struggling with the executive functioning skills, with some of the ADHD and autism challenges. As instead of focusing on why aren't they listening when I told them to do something, it's well, let's figure out a way to build routines into our day proactively. And what does that look like? And maybe they're not following instructions. Maybe they don't have the skill of, following the routines, or it's not visual enough, or they're struggling with the transition. So making those things like visual schedules for home, practicing routines at home, those really go a long way. I find that having routines and visuals and supports to encourage those routines really go a long way in like organization and, executive functioning skills at home.
For more information on ADHD and autism strategies, click the link on or around this video to join our CEU event, Not Just Autism, How ADHD Changes Your ABA Approach. We'll also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future videos and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.